was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. Welcome. Today, I'm excited that we're going to meet with Uriya Rosenman, an Israeli star rapper and writer of Let's Talk Straight. He performs the rap with his Palestinian partner, SAZ Zakout. One of the many reasons I'm excited is that rapping, of course, is directed toward the younger generation, and who but the next generation is not only faced with what their parents' generation screwed up, but they're the ones who will have to fix it. Let's Talk Straight is patterned after the song by Joyner Lucas's song, I'm Not Racist. The YouTube rap video shows two men, one Israeli, one Palestinian, hurling insults at each other. You might hear the same on any street or at a holiday dinner with relatives. Knowing what the other thinks of them is required understanding to begin to work on peace. It went viral. In fact, they now have another rap called Munfas. Do you understand the nuances of how an Israeli or a Palestinian might portray one another? We're going to be working on peace by going through the words that Uriya Rosenman wrote in Let's Talk Straight with the artist himself. The song demonstrates both narratives from an intense perspective. The rap is in Hebrew and Arabic with English subtitles. We found the subtitles helpful, but not useful enough, at least for us. But amidst the English words are reasons why there is not peace in Israel today. We apologize in advance for the foul language. We expect it will be the least of which will make you cringe. We thought it'd be beneficial to get into the nitty-gritty of the rap and talk about the not-so-nice opinions of many Israelis and Palestinians about one another. We think it will provide a provocative education and a probably painful but necessary step toward peace. Uriya is an educator who has worked in the fields of education, business development, and social entrepreneurship in Israel. Uriya created the Let's Talk Straight social project as a way to question the narratives he grew up with. He began his research by touring around Israel, meeting Jews and Arabs familiar with extremes on both sides of the spectrum, in order to transform their words into a blunt rap song. Eventually, he had some solid lyrics, but lacked the authenticity of a face-to-face confrontation between a Jew and an Arab. In May 2020, Uriya met Sameh Zakout through friends, and the two decided to join forces. Their blunt rap video, Let's Talk Straight, released at the height of May tensions, you remember those, reached 5 million views on social media and hundreds of millions more throughout traditional media around the world. Wow, that's incredible. And with that, welcome, Uriya.
Hi, Penny. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into playing Let's Talk Straight and going over the words of your song, you have so much going on. First, you released Let's Talk Straight, and then the end of last year, you released Munfas. How's it going?
Well, it's going great. It's going really great. I decided, since the release of Let's Talk Straight and the attention that we got, Sameh and I received many opportunities to participate in campaigns, in different collaborations, and in different, content-related opportunities. And what we did was we stopped all of our activities and focused on, fine-tuning and articulating, strategizing what we want to be doing as a duo, as partners. One is a musician, the other is an educator. We come from different backgrounds. What exactly do we wish to accomplish? And eventually we decided to establish Dugri, which is an authentic content brand. We use music and education to, inspire social awakening and eventually to build a community of young Israelis and Palestinians who believe in a mutually beneficial future. So that's what we're busy on right now. The second song that we produced, Munfas, it's roughly translated from Arabic to airway. It's about the sense of not being able to breathe. We can't breathe, we are tied to the same fate and we want to be in a different situation. So that's what we're focused on right now, how to create inspiring content and to aggregate the young moderate voices around us to create a better future.
Terrific. One of the main taglines that you use that everyone wants to change the world, no one wants to change themselves. What do you mean by that?
I mean something very, simple. I think that you look around you today, you look on the social media, you look on the young generation. People are heavily invested in their, success, in what impact do they have on this world. And everybody wants to be significant. Everybody wants to be an influencer, to be impactful. But I think that the most basic thing to be focused on as a human being is how I can improve and develop myself and my consciousness. So when everybody wants to change the world, nobody wants to change themselves. That's like a quote from Tolstoy. And it's a really significant one. And it really touched my heart when I was exposed to it. And I took upon myself to try and change myself and open myself to perspectives that I didn't possess from before. And I think that's a very important personal ambition.
I agree. You also acknowledge that this is a marathon and not a sprint. I kind of know what that means, but you want to talk about that?
Yeah, just in short, let's refer only to myself and to Dugri and my work with Sameh. A viral video won't change anything. The reality is very complicated and very shitty also, like people are suffering right now as we are doing this interview. So like when I do what I do with Sameh, I don't expect myself to be all of a sudden this leader, a viral video won't change anything on the ground. But if we start the process of becoming friends, coming together, knowing each other's languages, culture, and respecting, the possibility to work together and build a better future, I think that's a long-term process. And that's the mentality necessary to achieve it, marathon rather than a sprint.
Yeah. What were you working on before Let's Talk Straight?
Let's Talk Straight was an independent side social project of mine. Like I was a student for a double major, BA in psychology and BA in business. And I was also working at a couple of NGOs for a couple of years straight, mostly in education and social entrepreneurship. I taught math and physics. I developed educational programs for underprivileged kids who come from, like socioeconomic backgrounds. And after a couple of years in education, like teaching in schools and developing educational programs for youth, I joined Stand With Us, a pro-Israel organization that does Israel advocacy. I developed educational programs for IDF soldiers and soon to be released soldiers, also talking about the encounter with Israel's problematic image while being on their very common post-army trip. It's something that a lot of Israelis are doing. They travel the world after their army service and they encounter a very, like disturbing image of Israel. That was something that was unique at my time. So I developed educational programs, how to understand that, how to share Israel's story and yourself better. And I was like, I've always been super connected to the country of Israel. And, like I served in the IDF as a combat officer and I grew up in a very Zionist family. So being an educator for Stand With Us, that's something that came very natural for me. But just to finish, the story, I can say that in the past years, my understanding of Israel, the world of Israel advocacy, and the situation that we have, as a country, has developed a lot. Like my understanding grew. I see a much wider spectrum of things, and I feel like I'm able to maintain and contain this complexity of, on the one hand, loving my country and defending it, and on the other hand, criticizing it for the wrongdoings that we are responsible for.
Yeah, that's really difficult. I know certainly my comprehension has expanded, and when you speak with the other, it can be really painful, but it's totally necessary. There's no other way to work on peace, and it can be painful. So we talked a little bit about what the reaction was. Can you talk a little bit more about what the reaction was when Let's Talk Straight came out? I mean, it was during the war that broke out too in May. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course, I want to give a full picture. When I was working independently on this project, my friends gave me advice, everything is about timing. You should focus on releasing the project when the timing is right. And I thought to myself, we have a bunch of elections. Elections is always, on fire. I can use that and I will publish it before the elections, but I didn't make it on time. We were too busy. Sameh was also very busy with his own things, and we didn't film the video on time. The elections were already gone. And, we released the video as soon as it was ready after 3 years of work. Really, there was no other condition for releasing the video rather than let's just finish it and put it out there. But holistically, what happened was that the May riots started. Guardians of the Wall, maybe that's the name of the operation with the situation with Gaza. And 2 weeks after the riots started, it was Thursday, May 20th, we released that morning our video at the same day of the ceasefire with Gaza. So while the country was burning inside and from the inside and also on the borders, this video just jumped to the internet only through our own personal social medias, like there was nobody supporting it, no budget. And eventually it reached.
I'm familiar with that side of things.
Yeah, it really went viral pretty quickly because it reflected a lot of emotions that, are very typical for the average Israeli, the average Palestinian, and I would say the average Jew and Arab in this region, because it's not really about the nationality, it's about more of the ethnicity, and my understanding of that also grew tremendously since I started the project. The reactions were super diverse. Majority of the responses were, inspired, and they said, wow, that was such an intense way of putting a mirror in front of society. We got so much love and responses of, such a needed voice. Thank you for doing this project. Thank you for coming together. And obviously we got also the other side, which is, people who have more, like extreme opinions, and they either blame me for being too right-wing and using harsh language and I'm a racist for what I'm saying as a Jew, or that I'm such a left-wing collaborating with an Arab and that I'm a hypocrite and I'm just a leftist from Tel Aviv who is not connected to anything. Yeah. But I get all this response with understanding and respect. I chose to put myself out there and I don't judge other people. I just think that I have a wide spectrum of, ability to see things given my experience and my life, happenings. And I'm very proud of what I did. And I take their comments and feedback with pride.
Good for you. In this conflict, no matter what you say, there's going to be some people who support it and many people who don't. So you just have to live your truth. So before we play the rap, let's clarify who you're speaking to in the rap. These are both Israeli and Palestinian citizens living in Israel that you're addressing. And Palestinians are about 20% of the country, but they live separately for the most part from the Jewish Israelis. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, as I said before, my understanding of what is the difference between a Palestinian and an Arab Israeli really grew since I started this project. At the beginning, I thought, I don't want to go into the Palestinian issue. That's too complicated. I want to focus within my country. I want to speak about the Jews and the Arabs within Israel, the Arab Israelis.
Right.
Since then, since meeting Sameh, since learning about the Nakba, since learning about, basically the Arab culture that I was mostly afraid of, I understood that between what we call an Arab Israeli and what we call a Palestinian, there is a scale which is completely complex, like the scale of the Jews between the Haredis and the seculars in Tel Aviv.
Right.
And this scale of things is very complicated. So today I understand that, majority of the Arab Israelis, the 20% of our country, they also identify, at least in part, as Palestinians. Even though that they have Israeli citizenship, they identify as Palestinians because of reasons, because of them having families that lived here even before the establishment of the State of Israel. So their Palestinian identity, even if it's not part of a specific country that existed as a country that had a currency, that had specific rulers, they still identify as Palestinians. So me trying to create this, dichotomy between a Jew and an Arab within Israel, that doesn't work out anymore, because that Arab Israeli is also a Palestinian, whether I understand it or not. So that was what this song is about, the Israeli Jew and the Palestinian Arab Israeli, or whatever he is, those two dichotomies.
Yeah. So let's play your video of Let's Talk Straight.
בוא נדבר דוגרי, לא מבין באיזה קטע אתם הערבים כועסים. רוצים שוויון זכויות ואצלנו במדינה לחיות, אבל צבא אתם לא עושים. חנין זועבי, אחמד טיבי, לא סתם אנחנו תמיד בוחרים את ביבי. נערתם לקלפי ושוב קיבלתם זיבי. להאמין בדו-קיום זה סתם להיות נאיבי. אז וואלה כן, כשאני שומע את המבטא אני תמיד בוחן. רק אל תגיד לי גזענות, תפסיק להתמסכן. אתה מזדהה כפלסטיני, אז איך תהיה שכן? שמע, זה דפוק. איפה שיש ערבים, יש פיגועים. ואתם עוד ספים להיכנס למועדונים? אולי תפסיקו להטריד לנו את הנשים? יעני, אתם עוד תקועים בעבר. רצח על כבוד המשפחה, נו בחייאת, מה נסגר? גרים בחמולות, יורים בחתונות, נוהגים כמו נבלות, מתעללים בחיות, גונבים מכוניות, דופקים לנשים שלכם מכות, ואז תמיד רק תלונות. מתי תתחילו למלא חובות? זה מרגיש די אבוד. אפילו בדואי לובש מדים נראה לי חשוד. נו? איך נדבר על איחוד? על כל רופא ורוקח יש ערבי שהיה מעדיף לחיות לחוד. אז מה, לחכות שאיזה מחמוד ייקח סכין ויצעק יטבח אל יהוד? אין ארוחות חינם. תלמדו לדבר עברית קינה, נתחיל משם. תשלמו ארנונה ותבנו חוקי כמו כולם. תשחררו כבר את הקוראן ותיפתחו לעולם. אני חיובי. אני לא גזען, הגנן שלי ערבי. אני לא גזען, אני קונה בשר בחינאוי וגם נרגילות ביפו אצל איזה ערבי. פשוט איבדתי תקווה, קשה לראות את היום שנוכל לחיות בשלווה. כנראה כהנא צדק שצעק הפרדה, אולי באמת עדיף לכם בעזה ובגדה. אני לא גזען, אני נשבע, אבל יש בינינו תאום תרבותי ויש גם סיבה. יהדות זה תיקון עולם, חיים ואהבת חינם, ואתם מחנכים ילדים לשנאה בשם האסלאם, הנה על העולם. ורק אכפת לכם מאללה ונקבה והג'יהאד והכבוד ששולט ביצר, מנהיגים שמטיפים להילחם בכל היתר, ציבור עיוור שלא חושב ורק הולך כמו עדר. תתלוננו על הכל, תבכו כמה שרע, תאשימו את כולם במקום להביט במראה. תנו לנו עוד כמה סיבות לפחד ולא לנסות להתקרב ויחד לחיות, נראה שאין מה לעשות. סתם כפויה טובה, למה שלא תעשו שירות לאומי, עזוב צבא? איך אתם מעיזים בכלל לקחת תקציבים? אם לא תשרתו את המדינה מבחינתי אתם אויבים, יא ערבים. אני לא גזען, פשוט תופס מרחק, זה הכל. צחי התחתן עם לוסי, זה גדול, אלק לא שייך לשמאל, כוכב של פאודה והערבייה, סתם פרסום זול. הוכחתם שאפשר גם אחרת, הרי הגעתם כבר לכנסת וגם לנבחרת, אבל גם שם אתם לא באמת רוצים להתחלק. סוס טרויאני, סכין בגב, זרע המלך. יאללה ערבב תתיח יא אחמד, בזה תמיד היית טוב, רק אל תעשה לי עבודה ערבית ואל תעבוד חפיף. אם אתה לא מרוצה תמיד יש תחליף, במקומכם להביא כמה סודנים, כיף. אני לא גזען, מבין שיש עוד צד לסיפור, אני לא חי בסרט. אני לא גזען, אנחנו חולקים את המדינה אבל השנאה לא נגמרת. הלוואי שהמציאות הייתה אחרת. נשבע לך שאני לא גזען.
בוא נדבר דורי, אתם היהודים שכחתם מה זה להיות מיעוט. התחלתם כור היתוך, אבל עכשיו נשאר הכור אטומי, אפרטהייד וגזענות. ודי עם החרטא התרבותית, חצי מהלקסיקון שלכם מילים בערבית. סבבה, דחקה, יאללה, בעסה, אחלה דוואווין, רסמי סחבק ערבית, אסלי בחיים אתה לא תבין. خلص أنا فلسطيني وهذا الموجود خليك ساكت. لو مروا 2000 سنة أنا هون ثابت. من لغتي خايف طز فيك يا جاهل زمنك فائت. أنا ما ببرر عمليات أني نجد اللي يموت، بس 70 سنة احتلال أكيد تيه يتنجدوت. כשאתם פותחים מנגל חוגגים עצמאות, הנכבה בשביל סבתא שלי זה המציאות, יא שרמוט. אומרים ערבי טוב זה ערבי מת, ואז עוד מתלוננים שלא משרת. הממשלה הזו עושה אותי אזרח סוג ב'. قانون القومية على السلطة بيزيد. مجان دافيد بيمثلنيش ولا حتى النشيد. تحط لي ضو بالحارة والله إنه يوم عيد. الدولة مش شايفاني إنسان شايفاني شهيد. أنت دبر بال شيفيون بناتل כשאנחנו שום שוויון. שב תשתוק תקשיב זה דבר ראשון. איך אני אקים עסק אם אני לא נכנס למועדון? גם מזרחים אוכלים את החרא הזה בגלל דמיון, לא? זה לא נורמלי. ב-48 גירשתם את המשפחה שלי. האוכל עוד היה חם כשפרצתם לבתים. כובשים ומכחישים, לשמוע את האמת זה לא נעים. بتعرف ايش عربي وبتعرف ايش جارك. بدكاش اسكن جنبك وانا بنيت لك دارك. אתה לא الحارس אין לך מושג. וכל מה שאתם אומרים לנו שטויות. יש לכם 22 מדינות ערביות. אתה נוצרי, אתה לא נראה, יאללה נמאס לי. אני סامح من الرملة انسى أصلي. אני לא גזען, אני רדבן. אני משתaq לעילתי, מש شايفها من زمان. قالك מחנכים לשנאה בשם האסלאם. כבר 20 שנה אתם מבצעים בעזה רצח עם. כמה דם שפכתם, ורק אכפת לכם מכסף וכוח והכיבוש ולשלוט כעם נבחר. עברתם את השואה אז אתם חושבים שהכל מותר. הרסתם את יפו ועכו, מה יהיה מחר? على ايش بتعيط ولا مش انت هالجروك. كنت مكرم عنا باوروبا قتلوك. بعدين تعطيتني باسبورت شوف تعمليش معروف. حتى لو بيتي مكسوف فك الظروف مش رح امشي مكفوف. بس אני עומד זקוף, הלא מהערבים שאתם עושים להם אילוף. יש לי חלומות ושאיפות אני רוצה לעוף. וואלק סמע אני לא שקוף, תזכור טוב את הפרצוף. אתה חייב להודות שאתם עם של גזענים, אפילו מדינת תל אביב וכל שאר השמאלנים, אבל לפחות הם מנסים לא לראות אותנו כשונים. أنا مش عنصري بس زهقت. فكرت إني بكابوس ولما فقت فهمت. حياتي تتشاكل بدي أعيش وبمنعوني الحياة الحلوة اللي عليها حلمت. דואג לעצמך אבל פוגע בי. אתה עוד תלמד לקבל אותי, אני ערבי. אם רק נפתח את הלב ואת העיניים יא صاحبي, נראה שיש אותו אל לכומר אימאם ורבי. أنا مش عنصري. دي ابني بكرة يفتخر فيه ويعرف إني عملته المستحيل. לא גזען, לשנינו נרץ אחרת, וכאן השינוי מתחיל.
Wow. Wow. Let's Talk Straight really lays so many issues out that exist in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So let's get into them. You described Let's Talk Straight as pointing the fingers outwards, and I know you describe Munfas as pointing the fingers inwards. So let's get started talking about the details of Let's Talk Straight. Let's be clear, you intentionally are throwing out many stereotype beliefs throughout the song. In our time, we have we can't go through every line, but we'll go through most of what we think needs more explanation. So let's get started. First, let me share my screen again, and I'm going to put up the words here. And okay. So if you can read your words here in the first verse, Uriya, I'd appreciate it, and we'll work through the song that way. You read the verse, and then we'll talk about it, okay?
Yeah.
So what are you saying here?
Yeah, Khanin Zouabi, Ahmed Tibi, I mean, the first part is pretty straightforward. The Israeli complaint about the Arabs not being obligated to serve in the IDF. The referral to Arab politicians is the fact that Arab politicians usually, when they are in the Israeli Knesset, they tend to represent the Palestinian cause much more than address internal Arab-Israeli issues, like infrastructure, like criminal activity within the Arab society, like conditions of living and housing. So given their nature as Arab politicians and the way they participate in the Israeli Knesset, I was referring to Prime Minister Netanyahu as for some reason, I don't know why, he's the representative of the right-wing electorate. He's perceived as a strong leader and as a fierce right-wing leader, even though that results show that he's quite the opposite. So I was just trying to represent a stereotype of, the Israeli right-wing, also using a quote by Netanyahu when he said in the elections of 2015 that the Arabs are flocking the ballots, which was meant to, fire up the voters in order to run themselves for the ballots. And, summarizing this verse with saying that believing in coexistence is just being naive, given everything I just mentioned. It's just like a bad start for the song, a harsh start.
Okay. And the next couple paragraphs.
Yeah. Being suspicious of an Arab accent, given the harsh reality where for many years there were terror attacks in Israel, buses exploding, individual knifing attacks. So just hearing the Arab accent makes the typical Israeli become suspicious of what might happen, and turning it back to him as using the stereotype, don't cry, racism, stop the whining. You identify as, Palestinian, which for us means the enemy. So how can you be neighbor? How can you be a citizen of my country, but also identify as the enemy? And then just, throwing out a bunch of, racist slurs and stereotypes. Wherever there are Arabs, there are terror attacks. Of course, you suffer from this, hostile selection inside, trying to get into clubs because we have to be suspicious. Otherwise, we might be in danger. And eventually, another stereotype that I used, and there are many other examples like this along the songs. Is just trying to be as nasty as possible. These are all things that I heard in my life from different Israelis. It could be, in the street, in the football match, or in the classroom. It's a typical stereotype. Why don't you stop harassing our women? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this you list quite a lot of things that it'd be great to explain.
Murder for family honor, that's a thing within the Arab culture. It's not, it doesn't happen in every family. It's not something that you can, like, just saying that this is something that happens with all of them is racist and stereotypical, but it does exist. It also exists to a less extent, I think, in some Jewish traditions. But I mean, murder for the family honor, that is something that us Israelis perceive as, you know, like primitive, as something that does not belong to our current modern generation. And the fact that it exists makes us patronize the Arab culture in a way. Like, you guys murder for family honor, what the fuck? That does not fit within current society. And then going on to mention all of the stereotypes being used within our culture, you know, living in clans, firing rifles at weddings, driving bad driving culture, animal abuse, stealing cars, beating their women, and then always complaining and when you fulfill your duties, you know, such as paying the same amount of taxes, such as building with the same legal restrictions, such as serving in the IDF. All of the other accusations, the interesting thing about them is that they are based on truth. Some of them do fire rifles at weddings. Some of them do live in clans in sense of that a city is made out of a central family that they build together, you know, stores on top of each other. That's part of the culture in some cities, in some parts. But the generalization and blaming the Arabs for being like that, that's the racist, stereotypical aspect of the song that I was trying to repeat over and over, you know, to sound so harsh.
Right.
You know, even a Bedouin Arab wearing an IDF uniform seems suspicious to me. That's just, you know, like a exaggeration to show that even somebody that will wear the uniform of the IDF, but if he will have the accent, I will still be suspicious. That's how much I'm traumatized. And you know, there is always the claim that Arabs are a major force within the Israeli medical industry, you know, like a health industry, and just using that in order to say for every doctor and pharmacist out there, there's also one, at least one, who wants to kill me. So what am I supposed to do? Just acknowledge and love all the Arabs for the fact that there are doctors and pharmacists that integrate within us, but like, I mean, be like take into consideration that I might get stabbed because some of them hate me. So that's just, again, using the racism and stereotypical thinking to portray and to show the fear.
Yeah. So here,
yeah, that's, you know, that's nothing really interesting to explain. That's a random demand to speak proper Hebrew. You know, much more Arabs speak Hebrew than Jews speak Arabic. You know, so like that's just the typical demand of an Israeli proud Jew. You know, from in his typical conversation with an Arab, pay taxes, build legally, speak Hebrew, forget the Quran. That's just blaming. You know.
Yeah. I mean, the next paragraph is, it's so typical of what we see as a bigot would say. Like, you know, the classic line, you know, is in this one would be, "I'm not racist, my gardener is Arab." Is like just a bigot believes somehow if there's some way that you associate in some way with the other, that means you're not a racist. And
yeah, that's,
I thought this was so classic what you say
yeah,
here.
to be honest, this is a complete copy paste from Joyner Lucas's version of "I'm Not Racist." He did exactly the same thing about not being racist, you know, like like between a black guy and a white guy. Like, the white guy says, "I'm not racist, my sister's boyfriend's black." So I wanted to use his model and to do the same thing within what is the typical Israeli or Jewish way of talking about it. So like, who is the typical Arab that an Israeli would know? Maybe the guy who built his house, maybe the gardener he knows, maybe the guy from the supermarket, you know. And obviously I used Chinawi because that's a famous Arab at least, you know, like a butcher shop that a lot of Israelis buy meat from. So also the experience of buying a hookah in Jaffa, that's also something very, a lot of Jews experience. So I wanted to use those cliches in order to show the bigotry, you know, to exactly do what to make you feel what you felt.
Yeah, well, it's the same with anti-Semitism that, what do you mean I'm an anti-Semite? My doctor is Jewish, kind of thing. It's ridiculous, but it is how some people think. So the next, who's Kahana?
Kahana was a right-wing extreme leader supporting, transformation for the Arabs, believing in the entirety of the state of Israel, denying Palestinian rights. He was a very problematic figure within the right-wing leadership of, a couple of decades ago. And we still have some of his supporters today within the current not government, but Knesset, and that's a huge problem from within our country. So, given the fact that I represent in this song a right-wing bigot, you would say, or a racist, then, he's not saying that Kahana is the king, but he's saying, I look at you and I guess Kahana was right when he shouted separation. That's a famous shout, a famous quote, Kahana's screaming separation. Maybe you are better off in Gaza and the West Bank because obviously here it doesn't work out. Like we hate each other and you are not integrated enough and you don't respect the country enough. So maybe he was right, separation. Maybe you should be somewhere else. That's me already getting into the more aggressive kind of attitude here of the song, and I go really deep. It gets really intense.
Yeah, and it's here very black and white, presenting Judaism as repairing the world and love, and accusing the Palestinians or Arabs of only educating their children to hate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about religion to talk about it. But what I do know enough is, the ignorance and the attitude around religion within my own perspective as a Jew living in Israel. And I can say that we tend to perceive ourselves and the Jewish religion as more peaceful, more tolerable, more life-loving and respecting, and the Muslim religion as much more aggressive, much more determined, much more extreme in a sense. And I don't know if that is true or not. We are scared of the notion of jihad. We are scared of the notion of killing in the name of Islam. Like that's some sort of way of life. And I think that that's a very typical way for Israelis to look at the situation when it comes to Judaism and Islam. And that's why I used those phrases. I thought that, it really represents the perception within Israeli society that there's a cultural abyss between the two peoples.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, that's just part. I use the same model as Joyner. All you care about is Allah and Akbar, throwing words that represent them, saying bad stuff about their leaders, about how much they follow their corrupt leadership like sheep, and they don't have enough of an opposition, Yeah, that's a a legit claim of why, like you don't agree to serve in the IDF for moral reasons. You don't want to be, fighting within the IDF, maybe potentially fighting family from Gaza or from West Bank. But why wouldn't you do a national service and serve your country in a civilian way? That's a legit claim that comes out of a lot of Israelis. And I consider you enemies because you just take from the country and you don't give back. The next paragraph is about, you know, a famous couple from the Israeli entertainment industry. That one is Tahi and Lucy. One is an Arab, one is a Jew, and they get a lot of attention for some reason because of that. They are two both great people, amazing people.
Yeah, just because one of each married each other. It's inflammatory in some areas for sure. So here you've
Every word in this song is super charged with meaning, but I mean, it can take us a long time to go over everything, you know. I'm giving the Knesset and the national soccer team as examples of where, like, you know, Israelis with, like, Arab with Israeli ID, they participate within the Israeli game, you know, and they do well, be it becoming Knesset members and leading parts of the Israeli parliament, and be it, you know, national soccer team players that lead, they score goals and get a lot of admiration from the crowd. But even there, something about them is always critical of Israel. It's always against the country. They're never proud of being part of us. They're always like shy in participating because they must be loyal to the Palestinian cause as well. So that is why I refer to them as a Trojan horse. Like, you are within us, but you might be backstabbers. You know, you might be Amalek descendants, kind of like the nemesis. You know, that was what I was trying to refer to. And the next paragraph is just being racist and aggressive. You know, like Mix the Stako Ahmed, it's like it's a very famous saying from an Israeli song by an artist called Ehud Banai. So like yelling at the Arab worker to mix the Stako. You know,
because so many are in
construction business.
builders.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, don't do an Arab job. That's like a really crazy
Insult,
thing, because
right?
that's a very common you know, sentence definition, a very common like quote from the Israeli slang. An Arab job is a lousy job, you know. So that's how we use the term Arab job.
Yeah, it's
like
an insult.
You know, like not all the way. Like you do it, but you don't finish. You don't fine tune it. You don't put. You're not pedant about it. You do like it, you do it, you know, like you, khafif, we say. So there's really a mix of racism in this last paragraph, eventually saying, if you're not going to be happy, if you're not happy with how we treat you, so we can always replace you with another, you know, low life in a sense. That's how we look. That's how we patronize over the refugees from Sudan that live in the south of Tel Aviv mostly and are scattered around the country. So, you know, I was just trying to portray the racist as, you know, even more racist. Like just, I don't mind juggling between my racism towards Arab, other minorities in the country. I'm just being very nasty here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I apologize if this is too much, but the goal of this creation was to create a shock and to make people, you know, like feel cringe when they hear it, because that's really the point of us understanding that this is exactly how we sound like. It exists. I heard it from many people in my life, many people, and it's time that we wake up, you know. So that's why I use this language.
No, I think it's perfect, and it needs to be shocking. And unfortunately, with some people, it won't be shocking. It'll be so what, you know, because they're used to feeling that way and saying these things. But to others, they need to know that it's not right. So, that's that. And we get into now the Arab side of things. So, or the Palestinian side. And this is what SAZ says. So, can you talk about that side now?
Yeah, I mean, I must start with, you know, like a disclosure, you know, like this is the ideal thing would be that SAZ would be here and explain everything. you know, because I
Sure.
can't really speak on behalf of him, and I'm not knowledgeable enough about everything that is written here. But given the fact that this is my project and that I wrote at least 50% of the lyrics of the Arabic side as well, then I can try to explain my understanding of things. But you know, with this kind of disclosure that it's only my understanding, it's only, my perspective, and it's limited.
Yeah.
Great. So, you know, he just starts by just saying it, you know, I'm a Palestinian, that's it, shut up. You know, like you talk to me like I'm an Arab Israeli, and that like I'm a Palestinian, you must acknowledge it. It doesn't mean that I'm the enemy. I'm just a Palestinian. It doesn't matter how you feel about it, you know. Even I don't care how many years you say passed since the Jews lived here before, many, I'm still here. It doesn't matter. I've been here for millennia now. You're afraid of my language. He's making fun of the Jew. You're afraid of the Arabic accent. Yalla, I mean, this time has passed. Move on, move forward already. You know, like I don't support terror. I'm against violence, but you know, 70 years you have been controlling the Palestinian people. Of course, you can expect that there would be resistance. For you, when you celebrate the 48 year, the 1948 Independence Day, for us, that same event is considered an Nakba.
Right.
You,
Which
like
means
that's,
catastrophe.
yeah, which means catastrophe and means the national catastrophe of Palestine, because they didn't exist as a country, but they existed as a people. At least that's how they claim. And given the fact that they existed as people, it's their disaster that instead of them becoming a country, you know, like given the status of the entire Arab League attacking Israel and eventually Israel winning the war, then the catastrophe is that they lost their chance to gain an independent country. And he's saying that very clearly in order to say that this story is part of my story. Even though you consider me as an Israeli Arab, I'm also like, I have family that's their catastrophe, you know, so he starts very strong.
Yeah. So this is.
That's like an actual statement. People say that's a statement I heard a lot in my life. Aravi tov ze Aravi met. That's a very racist statement that I heard people say, you know, some of the racist people that exist within our society and are super afraid of Arabs and that are used to hear about Arabs that only blow up in buses and want to kill all the Jews. That's all they know and think about them. So from that ignorant perspective, some of them might say a good Arab is a dead Arab. So he's saying that as like, you come with complaints to me, but you know that some of your people say this word, they think that I should be dead. So what are you talking about? Like, who am I working with here? You know, that's what he's saying. I'm being treated as a second-class citizen. The nation build doesn't represent me. The anthem doesn't represent me. The Star of David doesn't represent me. I'm in a country that doesn't represent me, you know, like, and then to go all the way to the other side, he's given examples of what he celebrates, you know, like, when we have new streetlights in our neighborhood, that's a celebration. That's how bad you treat us as a country. You see me as a terrorist, not a human being. It's a very honest, you know, share of emotions.
Can you point out what the nation state bill is and why they feel it doesn't apply to them?
No, I can't. I'm not knowledgeable enough to elaborate on the nation state bill, but it's obviously a state bill that was passed not long ago that, you know, I would like reduces the importance and the level of I don't know, like the class of the Arab minority within the like the constitution of the country, I can say.
Well, that it's a Jewish state.
Yeah, not only that, there are a lot of other complications within the nation state bill.
Right.
It's not that it's a Jewish state, and I think that I'm not knowledgeable enough to explain. But that, obviously, what he's trying to say is that he does not support that kind of bill, and that this means this means degrading him.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, don't talk about equal burden because we have no equality. How can we be part of the burden if we are not part of anything? Like when we don't get the same amount of budgets, when we don't get the same attitude from police, when we don't get, I mean, any resources and any equality when it comes to renting an apartment and a lot of other stuff. So like first thing first, before demanding the equal that I participate in the burden, first of all, shut up and listen to me. Like I can't even get into a bar, so obviously I couldn't open a business. It's so hard for me. I don't get the same opportunities. I can't be in everywhere in the country because it's controlled by Jews and I experience racism. Some of the Mizrahi Jews that look more like Arab than like Ashkenazi Jews, they suffer from the same racist shit, So this is exactly what he's referring to in the last sentence of the paragraph. And eventually jumping back to 48 and starting to talk about how basically even if I didn't want war, as a Palestinian living here in 48, my family was kicked out. Even if we were communists who didn't want to fight with anyone, we were kicked out because we were Arabs. The food was still warm on the table when the IDF broke into our house. You occupied and then you denied occupying. So here it is. The truth isn't easy. I'm saying everything in your face,
Yeah. So
blaming, you can speak Arabic, you can't, you know nothing about your neighbor. You let me build your entire country construction-wise, but you don't let me rent your house because you're racist and you don't want to be working or collaborating with Arabs. Then emotionally sharing, what's it like to be Arab in the Israeli airport, feeling like a VIP when everywhere you go, there are guards escorting you, being suspicious of you, stripping you from your clothes and doing, intense searches. So he's sharing with the Jew what it's like to be Arab within the Israeli country. Obviously, the Israeli security is necessary given, very, very clear reasons, but for him, it doesn't matter. He's a good guy and he's experiencing that kind of profiling, which is a very fucked up situation.
yeah.
Then later referring to the 22 Arab countries, that is something that, there's only one Jewish country. There's so many other Arab countries. Why do you want to be here? Go to, that's a ridiculous claim. They're connected to the land like we are. And, it's really a narrow way of looking at things. And that's the legit claim from him. A lot of time people see the Christian Arabs much more moderate and welcoming than the Muslim Arabs. So like he's referring to how sick he is of hearing, oh, you're Christian, so you must be nice, but he's not even Christian. So like, I'm Sameh from Ramle, Insa Ansa Asli, I'm proud. This is who I am, I'm from here, this is where I came from, and I will never forget it. So that's what he's saying. Yeah, I miss my family. He refers to the fact that some of his family, when they were deported from, deported from Isdud, which is now Asdod, in 48, some of his family took left to Gaza, took left to Ramle. Some of his family took right to Gaza, and they said, we'll see you again in 2 weeks. And since then, they haven't met each other for 73 years. So, he's saying in his words, I miss my family. Yeah, right, educating to hate in the name of Islam. Like you talked about how Islam educates to hate, but for 20 years now, you're committing genocide in Gaza, so much spilled blood. Now, obviously, this is a problematic statement. There is clearly, without any doubt, no genocide in Gaza whatsoever. The population in Gaza is growing. So like when we talk about facts, that's just a wrong fact. But he used that kind of sentence in order to evoke emotions, because civilians are being killed in Gaza, many of them, also children and women who are not directly involved in any, military activity. And I think that part of it is because of Hamas, ideology and mentality of using the civilians as part of the war, but part of it is also because of IDF actions and, like Israeli policies. And I feel like what he's trying to say here is that you talk about Islam as a religion educating to hate, and you talk about Judaism as something educating for love, but you are killing women and children in Gaza. That's a fact. And he used the problematic statement in order to convey that kind of shock, and that kind of
Well,
intensity.
I'm sure it's also, I mean, it's certainly what you read that they say. So he also is saying things that are heard on the street. So, he's
Definitely.
presenting that side, that's the point. You presented some very bigoted and controversial comments that you hear Israelis say, and these are also some very distorted in one viewpoints that he also hears from the Arab and Palestinian side. So it's appropriate for this rap. It's disturbing, but it's very appropriate. And then he follows up with the all the stereotypes about Jews having money and power and all that stuff as well. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, you said it. Stereotypes about the Jews with the money and power. Obviously, jumping to the concept of occupation and chosen people, like you see yourself as, the chosen people. You get to do what you want. You think that you've been through the Holocaust. So now you get the legitimacy and the justification to do bad shit and bad stuff to the other peoples around you. And that's a mix of blaming and using stereotypes, which is definitely problematic and not always loyal to the truth, but based on some sort of truth and some perspective that supports, those claims. Saying that we ruined Jaffa and Akko, what will happen tomorrow, that's obviously, one perspective, because you can say that Jaffa and Akko are in much better situation today than they were before, but that's really, there's no way to prove this point. It's only from his perspective of, Jaffa and Akko were such a great place for coexistence, and also, like Arabs and Jews living together even before everything that happened in 48 and in 67, and then given the Israeli policy, we ruined the atmosphere and the coexistence that was there in those mixed cities. Yeah, he's talking about the fact that in some countries, during some periods of history, the Arabs and Jews lived side by side peacefully, and that the Jews felt very comfortable in maybe, Arab Eastern countries. They felt very comfortable living side by side. That was true during some period. That was not true during other periods where Arabs also slaughtered Jews in many countries around the world. So he's just saying from his own perspective, like my people respected your people, and in Europe you were murdered as a people. So don't you see yourself as a hypocrite? You're not doing me a favor for giving me citizenship and a passport. That's my right as a person who his family is from here. And then, I hold my head up high. I'm proud. I'm standing tall. I want to fly high. He's just being, aggressive and proud.
Mm-hmm.
You must admit you're racist people, even the state of Tel Aviv and all the other leftists, even the leftists, the ones that are progressive and liberal and live in the center of the country and that support the rights of the Palestinians and support, the maximum good for maximum people kind of attitude. Even they don't really know the Arabs, they don't really live among them, know their language. So from their perspective of being a Tel Avivian, drinking coffee at the middle of the day, they are also racist. Even from a patronizing perspective of, just wanting that everything will be okay, but not really knowing them, respecting their culture, respecting their tradition and language. So it's just being critical of everybody here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also, like that's pretty straightforward, and we took it from Joyner's model. Eventually, maybe,
That all people are the same. That
yeah, I mean, that we took it from Joyner's model, from Joyner's song. You take care of yourself, but you hurt me. It means that, like, I understand that you want to defend yourself, and that never again, and that the Holocaust and all that happened, but you can't, in the name of defending yourself, like, ruin my life. You can't do that. You need to learn to accept me. I'm an Arab and I'm here, and I will always be here. That's what he's saying. And eventually
yeah.
he's turning positive all of a sudden, because we wanted to finish the song in a positive, like a slightly bit more positive vibe. And he's saying that if we only open up, Habibi, my friend, we'd see that there's no difference between a priest, an imam, and a rabbi, because they are all perspectives and they're all stories of the same truth, like, to our existence.
And then finally,
Yeah. Wants to make his son proud, or attempting the impossible of, living in peace. And like we both have no other country, millions of Jews and millions of Arabs will never go anywhere. So we must learn how to live side by side. And that understanding is where change begins. And that is what Sameh and I do today as a duo, as Dugo.
yeah. Yeah, so great. It's so great. I mean, it's hard to listen to, but it's so reflective of where you have to start from, because that is the reality. That is the reality of you can't move forward if you don't know where you're at. And not everyone believes like this. These are extreme views, but far too many people do believe that way. So it is what you are working with. So what's happened since you have a degree, and talk a little bit about that and how you're promoting that since your first video came out, and then we'll play your latest video. But what's happening with degree?
Cool. So, I mean, Sameh and I sat together to strategize. What do we want to do? Okay, we became best friends after a year of working together. We spend a lot of time together. We've done 60 interviews around the world.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it's been really intense for us, and really we became close friends. I decided I need to take some time off. I quit my job and I started working on my own initiatives, long-term ones. And we decided we want to collaborate as Dugri. So we decided on three main goals, three main objectives that we share. One is, in general, from an egocentric point of view, to be in creation mode, to be busy with creating new stuff, being active, being vocal about the way we understand life. The second thing was that we want to inspire authenticity. We want to promote the idea of being able to speak openly and straightforward about how we feel. We want to promote a society where, people listen to each other actively and respect, straightforwardness, and respect that what you show outwards really reflects what goes on inwards. And we believe in that, and that is something we want to be promoting in our content. And third, lastly, the most practical goal would be to build a community. We want to build a community of young believers, Israelis and Palestinians, who understand the potential of straight talk and openness to create a mutually beneficial future. How are we reaching our goals? We are doing three main things basically to reach those goals. First of all, we are going to continue to create inspiring content. We are working on our own podcast. We are working on our next songs. We are working on many different artistic collaborations, and also we get attention regarding, like documentaries and stuff like that. And these are all methods for us to push our message forward. Other than that, we do. Thank you. other than that, we do a lot of grassroots work. We deliver educational and deliver educational workshops and lectures for teenagers and high schoolers. And what we do is we go from school to school, from NGO to NGO. We meet with anybody who wants to meet with us, and we talk about our story, what kind of journey I went through, how we made this project come to life, what were the responses, and how we see it connected to the potential future of us, Arabs and Jews here in this region. And this is amazing. Like, the kids are super interested. We come for a 60-minute session and we stay there for 3 hours, answer every question we get. You know, their mind is blown by our collaboration and how interesting our duo is. And, you know, eventually the third thing would be, like, to reach our goals is to actually build a community. We are on every social media possible, maybe besides TikTok right now, which is where we should aim. But we really are encouraging people and trying to invite people like us, moderate young people, to join the community, to be able to create more collaborations like this, a better fusion between the Jewish and the Arab culture, between the Israeli and the Palestinian culture, and to make this fusion cooler, to make it more mainstream, to make it more digestible for people. Eventually, through this community, to create many great initiatives that would make our peoples come closer together, so that one day in the future, when our generation will replace the current leadership, us that experience less traumas in our lives and more technology and more, you know, like, self-fulfillment, we can create, like, really a better collaborative future.
Fabulous, fabulous. So before I play Munfas, you want to introduce it? You want to talk about what it is?
Munfas is, you know, like a call to action from an emotional standpoint. We can't breathe. We are tied to the same fate. Even though that the situation is not equal and this, like, Jews and Arabs are not in the same position, we are both tied together, and the leaders are screaming at each other, but we both had enough, and we are dreaming about this basic concept of just sitting together on the beach playing backgammon. And the whole song is about that kind of dissonance between the basic dream to the complicated, you know, like, a constraining reality.
Okay, well, let me share my screen again and...
احنا مش سيئين ولا جهلين، عنا حياة وبنحب نعيش، بنحب العيلة، بنحب الربيع، بنحب البحر، بنحب نعيش بسلام، علقانين بين عالمين، بين اندماج لمقاومة، بين الرمل وغزة، حياتنا مركبة، فيش عنا منفس، فيش عنا منفس. صوتي هادي بدي أصرخ عالي، بدي أبني حالي مثل ابن عمي، أدوق الحياة لما شم ريحة بلادي، أشوف حديقة مش هدم بيت جاري. ככה דוגרי לפנים, هذه هي الطريقة، עברו מספיק שנים, بنستنى دقيقة, זה בא לי מבפנים, بدنا أصوات جريئة. فيش عندي منفس، فيش عندي منفس.
אני יודע מה אתם חושבים, עוד אשכנזי שמתחנף לערבים, אבל הייתי בקרבי ותרמתי למדינה ומסביבי שום דבר לא השתנה. חדשות כל שעה, בונות נרטיב, שירים וטקסים שבאים להכאיב, ומה שלמה עם PTSD, לאן מועדות פני העם היהודי. מנהיגים שצועקים חזק, אני מרגיש מחנק וכל קול מתון מושתק. تعي مسيح شباك النفاق، يلا بينا رفاق نبكي الخارج النطاق. اللي يغيبها اللي يغيبها اللي يغيبها اللي يغيبها.
צעיר שמשלם מחיר על גזענות ועל שחיתות ועל הראש בקיר, אז חוגגים בעיר ומרוויחים סביר, אבל המציאות חונקת אין אוויר. גם אם נקליט תלפיד, להיטי מסר קליט, כלום לא יזוז עד שנביא לכל מי שמחליט שחלשים משיט, שכבר יבנו תוכנית ושחייב להיות שלום בכל תסריט.
عيشتونا بأوهام كلام بجر كلام بالفعل صفر ولا شبر بس كله تمام يعني اللي فكرته حد يحط سكينة بظهره لعني سمعت همل كتير خلص بكفي فك عني ضيعت سنين أبصر قلبي شو ملهي هورت ما بلوم إلا نفسي عبد بنزين صرت عنيد داعس لقدام لحالي لو العالم كله مطفي
ככה דורי לבנים,
هذه هي الطريقة
אך מספיק שנים,
ما نستنى
זה בא
دقيقة
לי מבפנים.
نصمت جريئة
מנהיגים שזועקים חזק, אני מרגיש מחנק וכל קול פתון מושתק.
داعي نزع شباك النفاق يلا بينا رفاق يفكر خارج النطاق اللي يغيبها اللي يغيبها اللي يغيبها اللي يغيبها اللي يغيبها مش اللي منفس فيش عنا منفس.
Well, that was terrific. Thanks so much, Uriya, for your explanations of so many of the conflicting stories that each side tells themselves about the other. Next week, we have our last interview at Peace with Penny for the year. It's with Tomer Cohen, co-founder of Tech to Peace, on December 14th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Founded in 2017, Tech to Peace is a joint Israeli-Palestinian NGO that hosts 2-week-long intensive seminars for young Palestinians and Israelis, blending technology, entrepreneurship, training, conflict dialogue, and social activities, along with continued community building events after the seminar. Tech to Peace states that their mission is to build a community of Israelis and Palestinians who are devoted to coexistence in the peace-building process and are capable of gaining employment in the high-tech sector. They aim to build a strong community of Israelis and Palestinians who are not traditional peaceniks. Members of the community should at the least hold greater empathy towards either side in the conflict, and at best work both as a group and individually from their positions in society towards greater peace and coexistence. Their hope is that participants will influence others in their communities and workplaces to see the conflict in different perspectives and will work from influential positions in society towards a more peaceful future, possibly including from within the high-tech sector through Arab Jewish startups. We're looking forward to you joining us next Tuesday, and we hope you enjoyed learning with us, and may you live with peace, shalom, and salam.